Welcome to the Love of the Star podcast. I am Bobby Belt, Dallas Cowboys insider for 105 through the Fan in Dallas, your radio flagship home of the Dallas Cowboys. Joined as always by former Super Bowl winning NFL scout Brian Broaddus. He is now the co-host of the G-Bag Nation 2 to 7 p.m. Central, Monday through Friday on 105 through the Fan. He is also the pre and post game co-host on the Dallas Cowboys radio network. And Brian, I bet you had a wonderful 3-hour post game on the Dallas Cowboys radio network after one of the worst losses of the McCarthy era. I think it's fair to say.
They had some bad ones his first year, but you were playing with a lot of quarterbacks and stuff like that. So, yeah, I think what was disappointing to me, Bobby, was this team was actually going to play for something. There was still, the reports were getting out of Philadelphia right now what Jalen Hurts went through to get through that game and how sore he is. And that ended up being a 6-point game. And you just don't know. You just don't know what was going to happen as that game was going on. So you had to find a way to play. Dallas offensively, they no-showed. They really no-showed. The running game, which they talked about going in, it's something we'd like to try and get better at, non-existent. Backs couldn't hit holes if there were holes there. Their vision was bad. Offensive linemen couldn't secure down blocks, couldn't get linemen up on the second level. Tight ends, half-man blocking, and I mean half-man, like all of a sudden Pollard's that 3rd down and 5 play where they're trying to run on the first series to get a first down. Yep. You're thinking that maybe Pollard's going to, we've seen these guys make cuts and get first downs and things, but all of a sudden Dalton Schultz is blocking half his guy. He's not square on his guy. So Pollard's thinking, I've got to go where the block is. No, I don't. I got to just go straight ahead because I don't trust what I see. Man, there is a lot of things going on, and there was a lot of things in this football game. The routes weren't very good. The quarterback wasn't very accurate. I don't think the quarterback particularly saw things that pick 60 through. I'm going to say this. When you play cover 2, when you play 2 defenders on the hash, and usually the corners what they call squat, and they play up, their responsibility is that area to the flat. Usually when corners squat, they're taking everything that's kind of underneath. The safeties that are responsible for the routes behind them. For him to throw the ball on an out with cover 2 and squat corners, he got exactly what he deserved.
Yeah.
You can't make that throw. You got to know, okay, if I've got a route going to the sideline or a flat route and it's cover 2, there's likely going to be somebody over there. And I'll tell you, man, this game, the way that Dak played in this game, you could have just put Howell on the back of that number 4. And that's how I thought that maybe Howell was going to play for the Commanders. Like wrong reads, errant throws, taking sacks.
Yeah.
I if you would have said, oh, that's how Howell played for the Commanders, I would have believed it. That did not look like a 7-year veteran playing. But then again, his offensive line did him no favors in the running game. The backs couldn't get anything going. Even when they were trying to throw the ball to the backs, what's Zeke doing? They run trips to one side, swing the back. They're probably going to throw you the ball over there to try. You're not even looking for the ball,
Yeah.
And I think the thing that's really so disturbing to me is that Mike McCarthy comes out and says we had a bad week of practice. You're telling me in a meaningful game you had a bad week of practice?
Yep.
What? Okay, I get it. What was going on in Cincinnati and Buffalo and all that was on players' minds all week. I get it. But some teams went out there and played their ass off to win games. Buffalo's effort was excellent. Cincinnati's effort was excellent. How about the Detroit Lions? Playing, you know what the Detroit Lions were playing for? And Dan Campbell said it. We're playing so they can't go to the playoffs.
Yeah.
And you know what? And Dan Campbell played that game so his team would be 9-8. Well, they 8-1, 7-1 down the stretch. You know how the Lions played? Good for them. Good for that to me is so disheartening. Is and if I worked in the organization and saw that, I would have got on that plane and I would have been pissed. I would have been really pissed that we gave that kind of performance in that game with it meaningful. You got to play. The Commanders the week before played like you did yesterday. You let a rookie first-time starter move the offense. You had all those 3 and outs, 10, 11 of them. Why? Why? That's the question. And that's why, if I know on 105.3 The Fan, when you and RJ Choppy and Sean Sharif get to talk to Jerry Jones tomorrow, the questions are going to come up about Mike McCarthy. And you know what? And rightfully so. And I've been really clear on this platform. I think Mike has done a really, really nice job. I mean, to lose the quarterback and all that stuff like that. But when you don't have your team ready to play a meaningful game, now it could have gone along where you could have gone a half, but you could have built a lead and then you lose the game and you're like, okay, I get it. That happened. But the way that offense came out, I don't care if you're showing stuff or not showing stuff. You didn't block. You didn't read defenses the right way. You didn't run great routes. You dropped footballs. And when you ran the football, you went nowhere. That was bad. That's as bad as I've seen this offense play. They've had struggles against Houston. They had struggles against Tampa in week 1. But that was inexcusable to me.
There's so many questions coming out of this game. So many things that can be addressed. I guess let's start with specifically the quarterback who goes 14 of 37.
It was awful.
Which is, just to be perfectly blunt, it's Ryan Leaf-esque. You should never, as an NFL quarterback, go 14 of 37, much less if you're considered a really good NFL quarterback. Mm-hmm. When you watch it, obviously we talk about that cover 2 and he throws that, like, that's not just, well, I have faith in my arm. It's just like, what are you
looking at? What are you honestly looking at? And that wasn't the only one, Bobby.
No. It was. I know it was rampant. And sure, like, I know Greg Olsen brought it up on the broadcast. Like, man, these receivers aren't doing them any favors. They're not getting any separation. Fine, but even by accident, even with little separation, you should be able to fit more than 14 balls into completions. Like it was a.
How many of them went to Schultz?
Yeah.
I mean, any reception was to Schultz. I mean, in CD, the thing about was so bad to me is that Dak's just recklessness that he throws the ball at times. It's just reckless, and you're like double. Okay. I get it. Noah Brown you got to give Noah Brown credit for how he's played, but all of a sudden you're throwing, you have opportunities to throw balls to Lamb underneath or Schultz underneath on a 3rd and 10. And you try and just throw a rope inside to Noah Brown with like triple coverage with all that traffic.
Yeah.
When you've got guys underneath and you check it down to Schultz. He's standing 2 yards from the marker. He catches it. It's a first down. You got Lamb, same kind of position, but you just want to fire a ball into the middle of the field to Noah Brown, or you want to fire a ball into the middle of the field for Michael Gallup? Why?
Which was worse overall for you on the offensive side of the ball? Execution or effort? And I know maybe there's other issues like just decision making and things like that, but between execution and effort, which looked more concerning to you? Was there a lack of effort, or do you think it was just awful execution, awful play?
I think it was awful execution, awful play. Effort, you could tell. It wasn't like they were, when they were trying to run the ball, it wasn't like they were trying. It was like they were trying to block, pass protection. The pass that Dak threw for the touchdown to CeeDee Lamb, great route by Lamb, great protection, great throw. That's what made you go. And that game's now it's a 13-6 game. By the way, the missed extra point, bad snap. Okay, block punt or drop snap, bad snap. Not a really great day for our snapper Overton.
Matt Overton, yeah.
The extra point, the ball was on the ground and smothered, raised, laces away, yank, kick. But I'm sure that it was a situation where, Brett Maher's looking down. He starts his thing. The ball's being smothered. Now it's being raised. He's thinking like, okay, I got to try and kick this thing. I mean,
it's a hitch in it, yeah.
Yeah, but I'm just saying though, execution when you run plays, Martin, Smith, the tight ends, McGovern was not good in that game yesterday. At least I didn't see Tyler Smith get buckled, in this football game. I was worried about playing against these big tackles. And by the way, John Ridgeway, congratulations. 5 tackles, back-to-back plays. You're throwing guys around, playing with power. Hey, Cowboys saw something in you. It's a shame that they didn't know what was going on at wide receiver and cut you to try and get guys on the active roster. They felt like you were the 53rd player. Far from it, my friend. Far from it right now. But, but listen, there's no excuse. I mean, that was if you go out there and lose the game because you don't play anybody. Now, I was trying to figure out, okay, what was the plan on defense? Was the plan to play or was the plan to win? How was the plan? They played 3 different corners at left cornerback. What was the plan to try and win? Was the plan? I mean, and let's be honest, Bland, he's fine. Don't worry about Bland. He's going to be fine. He's going to play. Don't worry about him. But, you look at what was going on out there, right? It just Mullen, come on. I think they figured out. Now, I will say this, though. Coyle playing nickel corner, I think he's more of a safety.
Yeah.
Got caught in some, but the guy will tackle. He's kind of a willing player.
He's competitive.
He's very competitive. But other than that, I mean, you're looking at Osa, you're looking at Armstrong, and you're looking at Golston. Those cats came to play like they were trying to win a game. Clark, I'm still waiting on Clark, by the way. I know this is LSU on LSU crime right now, but hopefully having Van Der Esch back in there will help him because he looks lost in coverage. He gets knocked off the ball sometimes in the running game. He does not look like the same player I saw at LSU. I'm not making excuses for him, but he does not look like the same player. And maybe, this year I was expecting early some kind of that, a little bit of that learning curve stuff. It's sometimes there and sometimes it's not. But as of late, it hasn't been as much. I could say this, Anthony Barr can't run anymore. He can't run. If the ball is right at him, by all means, he's going to make a play. Ball away, coverage away, Anthony Barr can't run anymore.
How does it end up that Washington's able to get Terry McLaurin on Anthony Barr and Damone Clark at different times in this game?
Well, what happened on the first touchdown was they go bunch and he comes across and it's like they passed it from Wilson to Barr to Clark. And Clark was kind of like you see him on tape. He looks right at McLaurin and who hesitates. And then he looks back at the quarterback and you're thinking, oh, this is about to be bad. And it was because McLaurin just went straight across and it was an easy throw. But was
that pass off that they were doing? Was that just passing to the next zone responsibility, or were they like playing some sort of man match?
To me, it looked like they were playing zone. When you looked at Wilson, Barr, and then Clark, how it got passed. You've got to jam. If anything, you have to jam that crosser. If anything, step up and level that crosser or bump the crosser so he doesn't get into the route. And now if the quarterback holds the ball, now you're probably going to get a sack. But they free access across, Nobody ever, and Clark was looking right at him. Just jam him, bump him, throw him off route.
Yeah.
If they throw the ball in there, they call pass interference. Okay, fine. But you don't give up a touchdown. See, that's the thing about it's maddening. I get it if it's guys that never get to play. I get it if it's Luke Gifford in there or Cox or somebody that never gets to play. But man, they had several of those plays yesterday where you're just like going, why? Yeah.
What is of greatest concern to you coming out of this game? Is it Dak Prescott? Is it the other corner spot? Or is it, frankly, right now, the discussion I'm trying to figure out is Tyron Smith just not comfortable on the right side, or is Tyron Smith not?
Or Tyron Smith maybe done.
Is Tyron Smith done? Because Tyron Smith yesterday looked like a player who's done. And I'm hoping it's just he's not comfortable on the right side yet. But, man, when Effie Obata is working you on a couple different times and, you're just – it's not normal to see the ball snapped and all of a sudden Tyron's within a second turning around to see what happened when somebody was able to penetrate on him. And that happened a couple times.
Yeah.
And so it's troubling watching Tyron Smith play right now. So as they head into this playoff, which we'll talk more about Tampa Bay this week, they do play the Buccaneers. As bad as this was, I still think the Cowboys are in a decent position to win this football game on Monday against the Bucs. But looking at this, Brian, what is the biggest, most grave concern for you heading into this playoff run?
I want to say what's going on at left corner, but my thought is just play bland. The problem is Tampa's not going to just let you play bland. They're going to make you
3 receiver sets.
They're going to make you play right too. And that's my concern. That Tom Brady does not go through a game. He learned this from Bill Belichick. Go back and watch that YouTube video of him and Belichick meeting, talking about personnel and talking about who they're going to attack. He is going to see Nahshon Wright on the field matched up against his guys, and he is going to punish you for that matchup, is what he's going to do. Because they're not going to let you rush the passer unless you can find a way to make these receivers have to, hold up in routes, create negative plays. But he is going to find the matchup that is going to wear you out, and it's not going to stop. And that's my biggest concern going forward.
You're listening to the Love of the Star podcast. The Love of the Star is an Odyssey podcast. You can find it on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Brian, let's take a look here. Like I said, we'll get into Tampa a little bit more as the week progresses. Got a full 8 days on the preparation front there. So if you do come out of Tampa, you are going to be playing a playoff game on the road and all, you're going to be playing a playoff game on the road on a short week. So that's a little bit troubling, but Dallas is 4-0 on short rest this year. So that if you're looking for a silver lining, there's that, but we'll dive into those, the playoff implications here soon. I want to talk about the coaching staff and where things stand right now with that group. Specifically, before we dive into Mike McCarthy's future, let's talk about the immediate threat to your coaching staff, and that's Dan Quinn, who the report is today that the Broncos have requested to interview Quinn. Quinn addressed it with media on Monday and just said it's flattering whenever anybody wants you, but didn't want to talk about it past that. Said, look, we're focused on wild card game. I'm not talking about any of that right now. This is what I'm focusing my work on right now. I know we all felt like Denver was his job last year. Ultimately, it was. You know what that ended up being? That ended up being Denver thought they were going to be able to get Aaron Rodgers. And if you told them they weren't getting Aaron Rodgers, I don't think they hired Nathaniel Hackett.
No, I don't think
so. It was a job that was going to be his, changed at the last minute. Do you think take two, they say, all right, let's give this a shot, what we wanted to do initially last year? Or do you think that Jerry is still going to be able to save retain Dan Quinn as the defensive coordinator, or do you think he'd have to give him the head coaching job here to make him stay?
I was worried that some bridges got burned between what happened with Dan Quinn and the GM there in Denver.
George Payton?
Yeah, yep. George Payton, because I think they're really, really, really good friends. And I think that George was in a situation where he wanted to hire Dan. And then all of a sudden the Broncos, the Bolin family decides they're going to sell the team. And then the next thing you know, you got Joe Ellis and John Elway stepping up, and they're preventing, like, the Broncos were a team that had hired defensive coaches before, and it hadn't worked out.
Fangio,
Joseph, John Fox.
Yeah.
They've hired some defensive coaches, and they were probably thinking, we can't sell this team and do this again. I think George was under some pressure. I think you're absolutely right about trying to make a deal to get Aaron Rodgers, but Dan Quinn thought he had that job. Now, the problem you're running into, did Dan get disappointed by the situation? Did he feel like that George worked him on the deal? I heard that there might be some of that, but now, if he gets the opportunity, I've said this a bunch. There's only 32 of these jobs, and Dan Quinn, what did he do? He came back. The defense has done a nice job this year. You won 12 games again. That's a lot of credibility. You led the league in turnovers, getting turnovers again. You're proving you can sack people again. You're developing players on the defense. So there's a lot of things that make Dan Quinn a very inviting candidate. And Dan Quinn will help you with personnel, but he doesn't want to be the personnel guy. So that's why if something were to happen at Dallas, where all of a sudden it's like Jerry makes an adjustment, says, listen, I don't want to lose Dan Quinn, and I'm moving on from Mike McCarthy, that's something that, you maybe keep an eye on right there. But Denver is interviewing a lot of really good candidates. And but George knows this candidate, wanted to hire this guy. Let's see if in fact that they can get that done. Now, I don't think that he could talk with them until, am I right about that Super Bowl week before? But if Dallas gets bounced, he immediately can talk. If they don't get bounced and they keep playing, I don't think the window is till the Super Bowl week, right? Or the week before.
We gotta look at that again, because there was they last year there was a rule change that
did they open that up for the divisional games?
It was only in place for like 1 year, I think, and I don't recall if it got renewed.
Yeah.
Like, I think it was one of those things where it's a 1 year rule and they were going to reevaluate. So that needs to be looked into on that front to see when exactly the interview could take place. But as it stands now, I mean, you're right. They have, I think the latest odds I saw has Jim Harbaugh as the favorite. The next one, though, is Dan Quinn. Behind that, there's Sean Payton, who they have requested and gotten permission to interview. So there's some heavy hitters here that they can talk to. But, some of the rumors we've heard about, not only would it be Dan Quinn, but he could bring Brian Schottenheimer with him, who's here in Dallas as an analyst. Isn't he doing what Ben McAdoo did?
Yeah, he is. He's helping the defensive coaches kind of see what the game plan could be. Like, he's creating a game plan for their opponent, and then he talks about it with the defensive coaches, like how he would attack you with his personnel and stuff.
So that is a situation where Schottenheimer and Quinn clearly are working hand in hand every week in that sense. Schottenheimer was the offensive coordinator when Russell Wilson had the greatest success of his career.
Russ even came out and talked about Dan as a person and all that, knows him from
it seems like something that could make a lot of sense. Do you think there is if they say, hey, the job is yours and the rug is not getting pulled out from under them, do you think that Jerry would have the ability with either his checkbook or his
He already has.
Be able to get him to turn down that job? Last year it was Denver walked away from him. But do you think that Jerry has enough? Do you think Jerry would be willing to go to a financial place that would cause Dan to say, I'm good. No, thank you.
He might go to a financial place that's more than what Mike McCarthy's making.
Which is
Yeah.
$5 million a year, I think.
Yeah. I mean, Dan Quinn's getting paid pretty extensive.
Good money.
Yeah. The one thing in my 14 years I learned working for the Cowboys, if somebody comes after you or you have a chance to promote or they you get a chance to maybe go somewhere else or be promoted somewhere, they will in turn compensate you. But other than that, they will, like Will McClay, guys like that. If somebody comes that will interviewing for jobs, Dan Quinn, his contract is like an NFL head coach. It's very, very similar to the compensation is very, very similar.
It's like Will McClay having a GM deal, basically.
Yeah, like every time Will McClay gets interviewed, Jerry and Steven bump up his salary to make him like he's a general manager salary. So yeah, I mean it's what the Joneses do. If somebody wants you, they will. And I hope I'm using the right term here. I hope I'm not offending anybody. But money whip, is a term. That like they will money whip you to say, okay, well, thank you very much for staying. Here's some money so you won't be disappointed in what just happened.
Yeah, and I think that would. But as you say, there's only 32 of those jobs.
Yeah.
So as much as the money may be an enticement, it may be more of an enticement that, hey, I can capture the magic again with Russ. I can work with Russ again. I feel like I can help turn things around. And there's a lot there that would obviously be enticing to Dan Quinn. And it's something we'll have to watch for as we move forward. I'm sure, as much as Cowboys fans have been frustrated with him, I'm sure we'll hear at some point Kellen Moore will undoubtedly get an interview somewhere. Maybe a couple. The question on Mike McCarthy, Brian, after the performance that they gave on Sunday, and after they didn't play great against Tennessee and kind of struggled against a skeleton crew in Tennessee, is there a scenario you think? Is there a way they could lose this football game to Tampa that would put Mike McCarthy's job in jeopardy?
Yeah,
would it have to be embarrassing?
Yeah, the more I think about it, it would have to be a Jerry Jones decision. It would have to be, Mike McCarthy is great as far as keeping the team healthy for the most part. Last year, I mean, back-to-back 12-win season, back-to-back playoffs. He fired a coach that didn't win this many games, but went back-to-back playoffs and Chan Gailey, and he talked about what a mistake that was. But Jerry Jones is like 80 years old now. And you bring in Mike McCarthy, you win a division or you get in the playoffs, but it's about what you do in January. It's about those January games. And if you have like back-to-back failure in January games, an 80-year-old Jerry Jones is going to look at Steven and Will, and they're going to say, I didn't sign up for this. I signed up for, I don't have many more campaigns left. And I'm not trying to sound morbid or, bad guy or anything, but Jerry Jones doesn't have, we don't, where none of us are guaranteed tomorrow. And that's the thing that, Jerry has to look at. He goes, well, okay, I have the type of roster that I think should compete. And if we're not competing in the playoffs, then I need to do something different. I would be surprised if he fired Mike McCarthy if they had a playoff loss. But then again, at his age, it would be something that would, as I say, not surprising, but something that I would understand.
Do you think that it's a scenario where let's just say, and obviously this wouldn't happen, but let's say it is an exact carbon copy performance in this game against Tampa Bay. Tampa does everything Washington did. Dallas repeats their performance. Is that embarrassing enough on a national stage that could get him fired?
On a Monday night game, I think that it was something that plane flight home from Tampa for Jerry Jones and Steven in their in their own plane flying home. I think that would be something. There would be a lot of competition, or excuse me, a lot of conversation about that. And that would be something that I think Steven would be very much well, listen, if you want to move on from Mike, let's talk about Dan here then, if that's what you want to do. Because I think that Steven Jones and Will McClay, if they were to make a change, I think they would make it in a way that they would like a guy like Dan Quinn, who they've worked with shoulder to shoulder on personnel. Dan's not going to rock the boat about free agent signings. Dan's not going to rock the boat about the draft. Dan's going to want to go out and evaluate players and try and help with the draft, but Dan's not going to want to run everything, So to me,
Dan is a personnel dream in the sense that Dan will do all the grunt work with you without demanding to make the call.
Absolutely. And that's where
a dream to them.
I think that Will and Steven have this personnel staff right where they want it, and their ability to manipulate players on and off the roster, drafting, signing, let's not sign, let's claim, let's do. They've got it now where they have no issues. You go get a guy like Sean Payton, who wants to be involved, but learn from the Bill Parcells moment of, why are you challenging me on this player that I want? Why are we not spending money on this player? Why are we not doing this? Why are we not doing that? That's the last thing I think that Will and Steven really, really want, is somebody that's going to come in and challenge him. Now, this is where Jerry Jones might step in. He said, listen here, you SOBs, you told me this, you told me that. I've got a team that I feel like can challenge in the playoffs, and we're not doing it. If you think that guy can do it, well, you got to prove me wrong, because come up with some other names where either Sean or some, they're going to have to come up with some other names. But I think deep down in their heart, Will McClay and Steven Jones want nothing to do with Sean Payton, just because of the demands that Sean makes on the personnel department.
Before we jump over to the mailbag real quick, Jerry Jones was talking last night, and he said he talked about everybody getting a bite of this sour apple, and clearly said, that we got our butt whooped in a way like nobody has done to us this season. And while he was expressing how disappointed he was, he had an interesting line there where he said, but I'm not half as disappointed as I will be if we're in the same position next week.
Yeah.
Do you think that was a little bit of notice being given? Like,
it
better look like this next week.
Yeah.
This next week, with the stakes the way they are, people are in trouble.
Yeah, I totally. That was one of those. Listen, I'm not too happy right now moments, and if I feel this way again next week, it is not going to be a good Tuesday morning for a lot of people in this organization, and especially on that coaching side. He has served notice. He has absolutely served notice. And I tell you what, if Jerry gets in the warpath, it's going to be about Steven, and it's going to be about Will and others to try and talk him off that, because I think they would want to kind of keep things status quo. Jerry might not be interested in their conversation.
You are listening to the Love of the Star podcast. The Love of the Star is an Odyssey podcast. You can find it on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Brian, it is now time for our Dean Julia Love of the Star mailbag, which, by the way, I got to tell you, I believe next week in Tampa. I will be in Tampa for the game. And Dean Julia did tell me he plans on going to the game. So I might get a Dean Julia selfie, Brian, and then my life will be complete.
There you go.
We'll have to stay tuned on that one. First question here from one of our loyal listeners, Stacy. She says, which duo needs to have their best game next week to give the Cowboys the best chance to win? Zeke and Tony, or Micah and D-Law?
Wow. Really good question, Stacy. I think that you're going to have to find a way. Man, Micah, okay, it's going to be about Fournette, D-Law, Fournette, pass rush, Brady. They're one of the worst teams in the league when it comes to running the ball, but they beat you running the ball in week one. Will they go for the same game plan? I think to me that you're going to probably need those. I think you're going to need those runners. I do think you're going to need those runners. I think the runners are going to have to, you're going to have to alleviate some pressure off Dak. And I mean, alleviate pressure with, even though they've been in some terrible down and distance situations and Dak's done a great job, like I think they were on a 7-week run where they were over 50% until last, they were 50% or better on third down conversions. But I feel like that Dallas is going to have to establish some things, offensively. And if it means mixing the run with the pass, moving, Tampa doesn't score a whole hell of a lot of points. That's been a big issue for them. I think if you can find a way offensively to put them in some bad spots, then you can win this football game. And I think it's going to be about Pollard and Elliott. And, Elliott ran for almost 5.5 yards a carry when these two teams met. They just went away from it but Dak was so bad in that game. I think that's kind of fresh on my mind. I know it was 17 weeks ago, but I don't want Dak to go through what we saw in that game or what he went through yesterday. So I think you got to run this football to the best of your ability with those two guys.
I'll take the opposite end then. I'll say Micah and D-Law, because I think if you can generate some pass rush, that's going to cover over a whole lot of sins at that cornerback too that we've all been stressing. And so I think the ability for those two to step up in run defense, the ability to get to Brady and not let him do anything down the field on some of that susceptibility with Nashawn Wright or Trayvon Mullen or whoever's back there. I would then trust that the offense, even if the running game wasn't getting going, would be able to do enough if you were getting really good production from those two. But either way, I don't think you can go wrong. I would honestly.
It's a great question. Great question.
I'd take either duo, honestly. Next question here from John. Julio, Godwin, Evans. I know Xavier Rhodes got the boot from Buffalo, but does he have anything to offer opposite of Diggs? An update on Bland, LVE, Hankins, Biotish. They will all play.
They're all playing, yeah.
Bland, Vander Esch, Hankins, Biotish, they're all playing. On Xavier Rhodes, Dan Quinn talked about he was impressed with his tape, likes his competitiveness, likes his football IQ, already been impressed with him in the building. He got signed on that was Friday. He got signed Friday night. He was on the plane Saturday. So even though he wasn't going to play, he traveled. And so I don't think they're just signing him for fun. Like they clearly are trying to mix and match and find something that works. So does Xavier Rhodes have anything left? I don't know, but they are going to try and find out.
Yeah, I think that, from what I was told, Dan really loves the kids. He's not a kid. Dan loves the player's length and is competitive. He just doesn't run as well as you probably would like. But in a playoff game with big receivers, this guy who has experience might have an advantage over what we've seen with Wright, Mullen, and anybody else you want to throw out there. Maybe you can find a way with Rhodes and Bland to kind of split some things, or you figure out you start Bland as the outside guy. You go to nickel, Bland kicks inside, and then Rhodes takes on the outside. You're going to need some people that are going to battle. These receivers are big. They're back shoulder catchers. You've got to be able to fight with them for the ball. And I don't know if Wright is the type of guy, even though I think he needed the experience, I would go ahead and ride with a veteran guy like Rhodes and see if he can, in fact, his experience and his savvy can help you in this game.
Next question here. Let's go with from @outside the star. Who can be the unsung hero Monday against Tampa? So unsung hero, I guess that would be more like who's a dark horse candidate to really step up and impact the game? It's an interesting question. I'd really like to see the linebackers play better. And obviously if T.Y. Hilton can play better than he did yesterday, more like they did in the first 2 weeks, those are probably some good options. But those are if you really want to, we talked about this all the way back in week 1. You've got to get Brady up the middle. So Osa Odigizua, there's a guy who, if he has a really big game, can really impact the end result.
Yeah, there's a couple of guys there I think about. Oso Digizua, I think, played so well for you yesterday. Armstrong played well for you as well. I would like to believe if Tampa is banged up, and I was doing the pregame show, so I didn't get a chance to see. I was watching the game, but I think Tampa's like on their third center already. Like I remember Brady was getting work with one of the centers. I don't know if something happened.
Jensen, Hainsey, and then that. Yeah,
Yeah.
so Jensen's been out for the year. Hainsey got hurt. I trying to remember what it was. I think it was a calf strain or something.
Yeah.
His status is a little in doubt. But yeah, they've got problems.
So if you could tell me that they're having to deal with stuff going on at center, give me Osa Odigizua in this game to be kind of a dark horse, especially attacking the middle of the pocket. Though everything that I've ever learned, the best way that you know that you're affecting the way Tom Brady's playing is if he has grass stains on that back of that 12. If you look at his name and there's grass on the 2 or grass across the back of his name, then you're doing a great job playing him. And I think that's the goal, is to try and get Tom Brady's jersey to have grass stains on the back. That's he's going to get roughing calls. You got to be careful of that. You got to be mindful of the pocket, Sam Williams.
That's the guy who you got to watch. Sam Williams, they need to drill that into Sam Williams' head this week.
Well, Sam Williams is capable of being a dark horse player, though, too.
Sure, absolutely. But you got to make sure that it's under control.
Yeah, because if you go low on Brady, they will throw a flag. If you hit him, if you touch his head, they will get you a flag. So depending on who the official is this week, we'll see. But, Sam Williams, that could be another Osa, Sam Williams, couple of dark horse guys for you right there.
Last question here from Ian Tisdale. What do you think the Cowboys, coaches and front office specifically, objectives were over the last 10 days going into Washington? Were they preparing to win a game or play it safe? It looked like they were stuck in the middle. What say you? I think they absolutely – I think they wanted to win that game. I think they were preparing to win that game. I think you had – CeeDee Lamb said it in postgame. CeeDee Lamb said, we knew we were going to win this game.
Yeah.
I think I don't think they were prepared for what Washington was going to bring to the table. I think they thought, this is a team that's ready to lay over and we'll just go in there and we'll be done.
Washington had every reason. They lost their playoff opportunity the week before. I think that could have killed their spirit. Ron Rivera starting Carson Wentz. It was so bad. The Commanders looked just like the Cowboys yesterday. No effort, no continuity, no nothing. Bad routes, bad running, bad block. Everything was bad. They let the Browns come in there and beat them up in a game they had to have. So you knew they were going to give a good effort. You knew that Sam Howell was going to give them a little bit of life if he could, and they did. They took advantage of it. Dallas was awful in all phases of this football game, and they got what they deserved. I know I say that a lot, but they really, really got what they deserved, and I hope it doesn't happen to them again, at least through the playoffs here.
That does it for us here today on the Love of the Star podcast. We'll be back with you a couple more times this week. Lots of time to prepare. It feels like an eternity away, but it'll get here before you know it. Lot to work on for the Cowboys. Lots to look forward to with the Buccaneers. It's one that they're going to have to put this bitter taste, get it out of their mouth pretty quickly here as they prep for the Buccaneers and the mythical legend of Tom Brady, who the Dallas Cowboys still have never beaten. So we'll bring you all that coverage over the next week. Until next time, we will talk to you guys later.